The afternoon sun baked down on the cracked concrete of a crowded shopping center in Brooksville, a small but divided city where unspoken lines separated who belonged from who didn't. Cars were squeezed into every faded parking space, shoppers moving in and out of grocery stores, boutiques, and banks. But all of that background noise faded into silence when one sharp voice cut through the air. "You can't park here." Heads turned. Conversations paused. The words weren't just loud, they were heavy, laced with entitlement. And the man who shouted them was standing tall in a pressed polo shirt, his chest puffed out like he owned not just the parking lot but the people in it. The man he shouted at, Darius King, a 29-year-old black man, stood beside his dusty sedan, calm but firm. He had only pulled into the parking spot 2 minutes earlier. He hadn't broken a single rule. There was no reserved sign, no restriction, nothing. Just empty concrete, free to park. Yet here he was, confronted by someone who clearly believed otherwise. Darius turned slowly, his dark brown eyes steady, his posture controlled. He had been through worse, far worse. After serving 8 years in the army, 2 tours overseas, and carrying memories that would haunt him for life, he wasn't about to let a loud stranger shake him. But still the sting was there. He had been home less than 6 months, trying to adjust to civilian life, trying to breathe freely again. And yet, even here in a simple parking lot, he was being told he didn't belong. "Excuse me?" Darius asked, his voice even but edged with disbelief. The man smirked. "I said you can't park here. This is for us. Not for you." His eyes scanned Darius in a way that left no doubt what he meant. Darius clenched his jaw, forcing himself not to react too quickly. His mother's words echoed in his head. "Son, the world is gonna test you. Don't let it decide who you are." For a moment, the two men stood locked in silence, the crowd around them growing. People lingered at a distance, waiting to see what would happen. And then, slowly, deliberately, Darius reached into his wallet. He pulled out a leather case worn from years of use. He flicked it open. Inside gleamed his U.S. Army military badge, proof of his service, proof of his sacrifice, proof that he had earned the right to stand anywhere in this country as much as anyone else. The arrogant man's face faltered. His smirk cracked. The crowd murmured. But instead of backing down, the man doubled down. He stepped closer, lowering his voice but not his venom. "Oh, so you're one of those? Think that little badge gives you special rights? Not here. Not in my town." The words hit like a slap. Darius didn't move, but something inside him shifted. This wasn't just about a parking spot anymore. This was about dignity. About respect. About a system that always seemed ready to strip away what little ground a black man stood on, no matter how much he had given. And before the moment could break, before anyone could step in, another voice cut through. "Is there a problem here?" A uniformed security guard approached, eyes darting between the two men. The crowd pressed closer, sensing the tension rise. And just like that, the stage was set for a confrontation that would spiral far beyond a single parking space. To understand why this moment mattered so deeply, you had to know Darius King. He grew up on the east side of Brooksville, in a neighborhood most people only drove past with their doors locked. Raised by a single mother, Teresa King, who worked double shifts as a nurse, Darius had learned discipline early. His mother used to say, "We can't afford to live life soft. We've got to be steel. Steel bends, but it doesn't break." At 17, with college out of reach and jobs scarce, Darius enlisted. The army became his forge. He learned leadership, resilience, and how to keep calm when chaos exploded all around him. But war changed him too. The friends he buried, the weight of survival, the nights when silence was louder than any battlefield. When he returned home, he carried invisible scars. Still he tried. He enrolled in community college. He worked part-time at a local mechanic shop. He visited his mom every Sunday. Yet even back home the battles never seemed to end. It was the side-eye glances in stores, the clutching of purses, the casual dismissals at job interviews. Darius had medals in a drawer at home, but here in Brooksville, too often he was treated like just another problem to contain. That's why this parking lot moment mattered. It wasn't just about him. It was about every time he and men like him were told, directly or indirectly, "You don't belong here." The man who had shouted at him was no random stranger. His name was Trent Mallory, a well-known figure in Brooksville. Trent came from old money. His family owned several businesses in town, the real estate office, the car dealership, and even part of the strip mall where Darius now stood. That polo shirt he wore wasn't just clothing, it was a uniform of power. He moved around Brooksville like he was untouchable, and too often people let him be. Trent had a reputation. He was the type to call police on teenagers for loitering, to berate cashiers for moving too slow, to boast loudly about keeping the town clean. And now he had set his sights on Darius King. The crowd knew who Trent was. Some whispered nervously. Others shook their heads but said nothing. Because around here, speaking against a Mallory could cost you a job, a lease, a connection. The security guard, a stocky man named Reynolds, approached cautiously. He wasn't about to risk his position either. "Sir, is this your vehicle?" Reynolds asked Darius. "Yes," Darius replied firmly. Trent jumped in before Darius could say more. "He can't park here, Reynolds. This section is for tenants and business owners, not outsiders." Reynolds hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. There was no sign designating it as reserved. He knew Trent was stretching the truth. But Reynolds also knew Trent signed his paycheck. The guard sighed. Maybe you should move your car, sir. Just to avoid problems." The crowd tensed. Darius stared at Reynolds, then at Trent. His fingers brushed the edge of his badge, still in hand. His pride screamed at him not to move. His training told him to stay calm. His heart told him something bigger was happening here, something that couldn't just be walked away from. "No," Darius said finally. "I'm not moving." The words dropped like a hammer. Trent's face flushed. The crowd gasped. And in that moment, lines were drawn, lines that would ripple far beyond this single parking space. The standoff stretched long enough for whispers to spread like fire. Some in the crowd pulled out their phones, recording. Others watched anxiously, torn between speaking up and staying silent. Reynolds shifted uneasily. "Look, let's not make this a scene." "Sir, I'm asking you politely." "I said I'm not moving," Darius interrupted, his voice steady, unflinching. "I have every right to be here." Trent sneered. "Every right? Don't make me laugh. People like you?" He stopped himself, realizing too late the cameras were rolling. But the damage was done. The implication hung heavy in the air. The crowd stirred. A young woman muttered under her breath, "Unbelievable." An older man shook his head, disgusted. Darius took a small step forward, his eyes locked on Trent. "Say it. Say what you were about to say." Trent's jaw tightened. "You think you're tough because of that badge? That doesn't scare me. Around here I make the rules." The arrogance was suffocating. But Darius felt something else too, a shift. The crowd wasn't entirely with Trent. For the first time, people were questioning him openly. Still, the pressure built. Reynolds radioed for backup, muttering about escalation. Darius knew what that meant. More guards. Maybe even the police. And once the police got involved, things could spiral dangerously fast. He exhaled slowly, grounding himself. This wasn't just a fight for a parking spot. This was a fight for respect, for visibility, for the truth of who he was and what he had given for this country. But just as the tension threatened to boil over, a new voice cut through the crowd. "Darius." Everyone turned. A woman stepped forward, her presence like a sudden breeze in the suffocating heat. She was in her mid-30s, dressed sharply in a navy business suit, her expression caught between surprise and concern. It was Alyssa Grant, a city council member, and one of the few local leaders known for speaking against Brooksville's old power structures. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her eyes narrowing at Trent. The crowd buzzed louder. Trent's face darkened. And Darius knew, whatever was about to happen next, it was bigger than him. Trent smirked again, but this time it was sharper, colder. He glanced at Alyssa, then back at Darius. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Trent said quietly, venom dripping from every word. He leaned closer, his voice a whisper only Darius could hear. "You think this is about a parking spot? You have no idea what you've just stepped into." Before Darius could respond, the sound of sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder by the second. The crowd gasped. Phones tilted higher. The police were on their way. And as Darius stood there, badge still in his hand, Alyssa at his side, and Trent's warning ringing in his ears, one truth became clear. This was no longer just a confrontation. It was the beginning of a war for power, dignity, and survival in Brooksville. The faint wail of sirens grew louder, slicing through the tense silence of the parking lot. Heads turned toward the main street as two patrol cars rolled in, their lights flashing red and blue. The crowd shifted nervously, some edging back, others pulling their phones higher to capture every second. Darius's grip tightened on his badge. He had faced insurgents overseas with rifles aimed at his chest, but somehow this moment carried a different kind of danger. This was home. His home. And yet he was bracing for battle. Trent Mallory straightened, relief washing over his face. This was his arena. In Brooksville, the police often treated Trent like a partner, not a problem. His smirk returned, sharper than ever. "Here we go," he muttered under his breath. Two officers stepped out of the cars. Officer Brandt, tall, barrel-chested, with a thick mustache, and Officer Delgado, younger, lean, with sharp eyes that scanned everything. The crowd hushed as the officers approached. "What's going on here?" Officer Brandt demanded, his tone already weighted with suspicion. Before Darius could speak, Trent jumped in. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. This man is trespassing in a reserved area, refusing to move his car, and creating a disturbance." It was a lie dressed in authority. Officer Brandt turned his gaze on Darius, his hand resting casually near his holster. "That true, sir?" Darius lifted his badge slightly, his voice firm. "I parked in an open space. There's no reserved sign. I haven't broken any law." The officer's eyes flicked to the military badge, then back to Darius's face. He didn't soften. If anything, his expression grew harder. "Badge or not," Brandt said, "you're escalating this situation." The crowd stirred angrily. A few voices rose. "He didn't do anything wrong. Check the signs. Trent's lying." But Officer Delgado stepped forward, silencing them with a sharp glare. "We'll sort this out. Everyone stay back." Alyssa Grant pushed her way forward, her tone crisp. "Officers, I'm a city council member. I witnessed what happened here. Mr. King has every right to be parked where he is." Her words carried weight. Even the crowd murmured with relief. But Brandt barely glanced at her. His eyes were locked on Darius. "Sir," Brandt said, his voice low and commanding, "I'm asking you one last time. Move your vehicle." Darius felt every pair of eyes on him. The crowd, the officers, Trent, Alyssa, all waiting. Part of him wanted to comply, to avoid becoming another headline. He could already imagine the narrative. Black man resists police orders in parking lot altercation. But another part of him, the soldier, the son, the man who had buried friends overseas, screamed that giving in would mean surrendering more than a parking spot. It would mean surrendering dignity. He thought of his mother. He thought of the nights he lay awake, wondering if his service meant anything in a country that still questioned his place. He thought of every young black kid who might one day face a moment like this. And then, quietly but firmly, he answered, "No, I'm not moving my car." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Alyssa's eyes widened. Trent's grin stretched wider, almost gleeful. Officer Brandt's face darkened. He stepped closer, towering over Darius. "Are you refusing a lawful order?" Darius met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm refusing an unlawful demand." For a moment, time froze. The crowd held its breath. Then Officer Brandt's hand twitched toward his cuffs. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "Wait a minute." Alyssa's voice rang out, sharp and unyielding. She stepped between Brandt and Darius, her posture bold. "You can't arrest him for parking in a legal spot. This is harassment." Brandt scowled. "Step aside, councilwoman. Don't interfere." "I won't," Alyssa shot back. "This man has done nothing wrong. You have cameras, witnesses." "Phones down." Officer Delgado barked at the crowd. "No filming." But it was too late. Dozens of phones were already recording, lenses locked on the unfolding scene. The crowd grew louder, bolder. "Leave him alone. This is wrong. He's a veteran." The word veteran seemed to echo. People pointed at the badge in Darius's hand. Murmurs spread. He served. He fought for this country. For a moment, Brandt hesitated. The optics were shifting. Arresting a black veteran in broad daylight, with half the town recording. Even Trent's influence couldn't fully shield that. Trent stepped in, his voice oily and loud enough for the crowd. "Don't let him fool you. Plenty of people wave badges around to get out of trouble. For all we know, it's fake." The crowd erupted in boos and shouts. Darius felt fire rise in his chest. His voice cut through the noise, strong and unwavering. "It's not fake. 8 years. 2 tours. I bled for this country. And I'll be damned if I let anyone tell me I don't belong in my own hometown." The crowd cheered. Some clapped. Others shouted his name. For the first time, Trent looked unsettled. His eyes darted around, calculating. This wasn't going how he'd planned. Officer Delgado pulled Brandt aside, whispering urgently. Brandt frowned, glancing at the crowd, at the cameras, then back at Darius. Finally, Brandt exhaled through gritted teeth. "Fine. But listen to me, sir. You're walking a thin line. Don't push your luck." He turned to the crowd. "Disperse. No. Show's over." The crowd didn't move. Phone stayed up. Alyssa placed a steady hand on Darius's arm. Come on. Let's step away. Reluctantly, Darius nodded. His car stayed parked. He had won at least this round. But as the officers retreated to their cruisers, Trent leaned close again, his whisper venomous. You think this is finished? You just humiliated me in front of my town. You don't know who you're dealing with, soldier. I'll bury you. Darius met his glare. I've been buried before. I always come back. Their eyes locked, two wills clashing in silence. The crowd slowly dispersed, buzzing with chatter. Videos uploaded, hashtags forming, voices rising across social media. By evening, the clip of Darius holding his badge in defiance would spread far beyond Brooksville. But in that moment, as Darius and Alyssa walked toward her car, the adrenaline began to fade. Thank you, he said quietly. Alyssa shook her head. Don't thank me. This isn't over. Trent Mallory doesn't lose gracefully. And now you're in his crosshairs. Darius sighed. He can try. But deep down he knew Alyssa was right. That night, back in his small apartment, Darius tried to sleep. But the echoes of the day haunted him. The crowd, the officers, Trent's whispered threat. At midnight, a noise jolted him awake. A sharp crack. Glass shattering. He jumped out of bed, heart pounding, and rushed to the living room. A brick lay on the floor, surrounded by shards of glass. Attached was a note, scrawled in thick black marker. Leave town. Or else. Darius froze, staring at the words. His military badge still sat on the table, glinting faintly under the moonlight. His jaw clenched. His fists tightened. This was no longer just about a parking lot. This was war. Darius didn't sleep the rest of that night. He sat on his couch, the brick and note lying on the table in front of him like cursed objects. The cold wind whistled through the broken window, carrying the sounds of a restless city. He'd been trained to deal with threats overseas, but this was different. This wasn't an enemy in uniform. This was his own town, his own people, sending him a message loud and clear. You don't belong. At sunrise, his mother's voice filled his thoughts. Steel bends, but it doesn't break. He swept the glass into a pile, taped cardboard over the broken window, and stood tall. Whoever had thrown that brick wanted fear to settle in his bones. Instead, it settled into something else. Resolve. But as he left for work, he noticed the first sign that things were getting worse. Across the street, a black SUV idled with tinted windows. The engine hummed, the driver invisible. It didn't move as he walked to his car. Just waited. By mid-morning, Brooksville was buzzing. The video of Darius's parking lot standoff had exploded online. Clips circulated on Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. Headlines blared. Black veteran confronts entitled businessman in Brooksville. City council member steps in to stop arrest. Hero or troublemaker? Heated debate over parking lot incident. Support poured in from some corners. Messages of solidarity, calls for justice, hashtags like #StandWithDarius trending regionally. But hate flowed just as fiercely. Anonymous accounts spewed venom, branding him a fraud, a thug, a liar. Darius scrolled through comments on his lunch break, jaw tightening. For every stranger saying, "Thank you for your service," there was another calling him a disgrace. He tossed his phone aside. Same old story, he muttered. But the real storm was brewing offline. Meanwhile, across town, Alyssa Grant sat in her office at City Hall, staring at the clip looping on her computer screen. Her inbox overflowed with emails. Some praised her courage for defending Darius. Others warned her to stay out of petty disputes and stop stirring division. She knew exactly where most of those warnings came from: Trent Mallory's circle. Brooksville was built on old families, old money, and unspoken rules. People like her, outsiders who fought the system, were tolerated only as long as they didn't threaten the balance. And what she had done yesterday was more than just stepping out of line. She had sided publicly against a Mallory. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Choose your side carefully. We don't forgive betrayal. Alyssa leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. She had always known challenging the Malorous would be dangerous. But now the danger had a face. A soldier's face. Darius King. And she had to decide, was she truly ready to fight this war with him? That afternoon, Darius returned to the small mechanic shop where he worked part-time. He had been fixing engines since he was a teenager, and the grease-stained floor felt familiar, grounding. But even here he couldn't escape the shadow of the parking lot. His boss, Mr. Alvarez, greeted him with a furrowed brow. Darius mijo. I saw the video. You okay? I'm fine, Darius said, wiping his hands on a rag. Alvarez hesitated. You know I support you. But business is business. I've already had 2 calls today from people threatening to take their cars elsewhere if I keep you here. The words stung deeper than he expected. So what are you saying? Alvarez's shoulders slumped. I'm saying be careful. I don't want to lose you. But the Mallory's, they reach everywhere. Before Darius could answer, the sound of glass shattering again rang from outside. They rushed out to find his sedan, the same one from the parking lot, its windshield smashed, its tires slashed. Spray painted across the hood in dripping red letters were 2 words. Get out. Darius stood frozen, rage boiling inside him. He had fought enemies thousands of miles away. But here in his own town, the war had come to his doorstep. That evening, Alyssa showed up at his apartment. She carried a folder stuffed with papers and a look of quiet determination. I heard about your car, she said as soon as he opened the door. This isn't random. Trent's behind it. Darius stepped aside, letting her in. I know. He's making good on his promise. Alyssa spread the papers across his kitchen table. I've been digging. Trent and his family have a long history of this. Harassment. Threats. Using their businesses to control people. Most stay silent because they're afraid. But if we connect the dots, we can expose them. Darius studied the documents, contracts, property records, complaints that had mysteriously vanished from public files. His soldier's mind recognized the pattern, a campaign of control. So what's your plan? He asked. Alyssa met his eyes. Fight back. Publicly. But I can't do it alone. I need you. Darius exhaled slowly. He wasn't looking for a fight. He had wanted peace, normalcy. But maybe peace was never really an option. Then you've got me, he said finally. For the first time that day, Alyssa smiled. The next week was chaos. Everywhere Darius went, whispers followed. Some people nodded at him with quiet respect. Others sneered openly. At the grocery store, an old woman muttered, "Should have stayed where you came from." At the gas station, a stranger shouted, "Fake soldier." The black SUV reappeared daily, always parked just close enough to remind him he was being watched. One night as he walked home, it crept slowly behind him. When he turned, it sped off. At work, customers dropped off sharply. Alvarez apologized, but Darius knew his job was hanging by a thread. And Alyssa? She was facing her own storm. At a city council meeting, Trent's allies grilled her publicly, accusing her of grandstanding, of sowing division in a peaceful community. But Alyssa held her ground, reminding everyone of what they had all seen in the video. The clip of her words went viral too. She was no longer just a council member. She was now a symbol of resistance in Brooksville. And symbols are dangerous. One Thursday evening, Darius received a call from an unknown number. Mr. King? This is Officer Delgado. We need you to come down to the station. Just to clear some things up about the parking lot incident. Darius frowned. Clear what up? That was 2 weeks ago. Just routine. Shouldn't take long. Something in Delgado's voice felt off. Too smooth. Too practiced. But curiosity and caution won. Darius agreed. When he arrived, the station was quiet. Too quiet. Delgado wasn't there. Instead, Officer Brandt stepped out of the shadows, his mustache bristling with a smug smile. Well, look who decided to show up. Darius's stomach tightened. Where's Delgado? Brandt shrugged. Busy. But we've got things to discuss. Before Darius could answer, 2 more officers appeared behind him. And in that moment he realized, this wasn't about questions. This was a setup. The lights in the station flickered harshly, the room too quiet, the air too heavy. Brandt leaned closer, his voice low and dangerous. You've stirred up a hornet's nest, soldier boy. And tonight, you're gonna learn what happens to people who think they can defy the Mallory's. The 2 officers behind him closed in, their footsteps echoing on the tile. Darius stood tall, his mind racing. He had faced ambushes before, but this one felt different. This one felt personal. The question wasn't whether he could survive. It was how far they were willing to go to break him. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting harsh shadows against the tiled walls of the nearly empty police station. Darius stood with his back straight, fists relaxed but ready. His training told him to keep calm, keep calculating. But the soldier in him recognized a battlefield when he saw one. This wasn't a routine meeting. This was an ambush in plain clothes. Officer Brandt smirked, his mustache twitching. You know, King, folks around here don't like troublemakers. And from where I'm standing, you look like trouble. The 2 officers behind Darius shifted closer, boxing him in. Their hands lingered near their belts, not weapons but batons and cuffs. What exactly am I being accused of? Darius asked, his voice even. Accused? Brant chuckled darkly. That's the thing. We don't need to accuse you of anything. All we need is a report. Disturbance. Resisting orders. Maybe assault. That's enough to put you in a cell. Darius's jaw tightened. So this is how it works? Trent snaps his fingers and you do his dirty work? Brant's eyes gleamed. Careful, soldier boy. That mouth of yours might get you hurt. The officer stepped closer. For a moment, the station was silent except for the hum of the lights. Darius scanned the room. 3 exits, the front door blocked by the 2 officers, a hallway leading deeper into the building, and a locked door behind the desk. No good options. But he wasn't here to fight. He had fought enough. You put your hands on me, Darius said quietly, and half this town will know by morning. Cameras were on you in that parking lot. They'll be on you again. Brant's smirk faltered just slightly. The officers hesitated. Then, before the standoff could tip, the front doors burst open. Ahem. Alyssa Grant strode in, heels clicking against the tile, her expression sharp as steel. Behind her came 2 local reporters, cameras already rolling. What's going on here? Alyssa demanded, her voice echoing. The officers froze. Brant's face turned crimson. This is a restricted area, he barked. Not when a council member is invited, Alyssa shot back, lifting her phone. I got a call about a veteran being harassed. I came to make sure he walks out safe. The cameras zoomed in on Darius, on the officers, on Brant's flushed face. For the first time the power shifted. Brant's jaw clenched. This isn't over. No, Alyssa said firmly, it isn't. But tonight he's coming with me. The officers stepped back reluctantly. Brant muttered curses under his breath. Darius walked toward Alyssa, his steps steady though his heart pounded. The cameras captured every second, the soldier walking past the officers who had tried to corner him. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, the reporters shouted questions. Mr. King, did the officers threaten you? Councilwoman Grant, are you planning to file a complaint? Alyssa raised her hand. No comment for now. She turned to Darius. Come on. Let's get you out of here. But as they drove away, Darius glanced in the rearview mirror. The black SUV was there again, headlights glowing like predator eyes. By the next morning, footage from the station had gone viral. Clips of Darius standing tall while officers hovered around him spread like wildfire. National headlines appeared. Black veteran confronted by police in Brooksville. Councilwoman intervenes in alleged harassment of soldier. Is Brooksville a town run by the powerful few? Support swelled. Civil rights groups began calling. News vans arrived in town. Brooksville, once quiet, was now a battleground under the nation's microscope. But with attention came danger. Alyssa received anonymous voicemails, resign or regret it. Darius found another note taped to his door. This is bigger than you. Walk away. Yet instead of breaking him, each threat steeled his resolve. He wasn't fighting just for himself anymore. He was fighting for everyone who had ever been silenced, intimidated, or pushed aside. One evening, Alyssa invited Darius to a small community meeting at a church basement. Dozens of residents filled the room, their faces tense but hopeful. We're tired, an older woman said, her voice trembling. The Mallorys have run this town like their kingdom for decades. But maybe now with you two things can change. Others nodded, some in tears. Stories poured out, businesses ruined, families threatened, voices silenced. Darius listened, his chest heavy. These weren't strangers' problems. This was the same fight he'd been thrown into, just on a larger scale. We don't need a savior, a young man said, looking at Darius. We need someone to stand with us. To show us we're not crazy for wanting better. Darius rose slowly. His voice was steady but it carried weight. I didn't ask for this fight. But I've faced worse than Trent Mallory. If he thinks fear is going to drive me out, he picked the wrong man. I'll stand with you. For as long as it takes. The room erupted in applause, cheers, even tears. But in the back corner, a man slipped out quietly, phone pressed to his ear. Trent would know by morning. The next day, Brooksville woke up to a shocking sight. The church where the community had gathered was vandalized overnight. Windows shattered, doors spray-painted with slurs. On the front steps lay a dead crow, its wings splayed grotesquely with a note pinned to its chest. Next time it won't be a bird. The town was shaken. The message was clear. Trent Mallory wasn't just trying to intimidate Darius anymore. He was declaring war on anyone who stood with him. That afternoon, Alyssa received a summons to the mayor's office. Mayor Whitaker, A heavy-set man with a perpetually red face glared at her from behind his desk. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest, Grant," he growled. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to this town?" "I'm exposing the truth," Alyssa replied coolly. "You're making enemies you can't handle," Whitaker snapped. "The Mallorys built this town. They put food on half these people's tables. And you're biting the hand that feeds us all." "Then maybe it's time we fed ourselves," Alyssa said sharply. Whitaker's fist slammed on the desk. "Careful, Grant. You're not untouchable." As she walked out, her hands trembled. But her resolve didn't waver. That night, as Darius returned to his apartment, he noticed something strange. The black SUV wasn't parked across the street this time. It was parked directly in front of his building. And as he approached, its engine roared to life. The driver's window rolled down slowly, revealing Trent Mallory himself, his pale face illuminated by the dashboard lights, his smirk colder than ever. "Evening, soldier," Trent called out, his voice dripping with menace. "Nice little movement you've got going. Be a shame if it ended." Suddenly, the SUV's door opened, and two large men stepped out, their silhouettes hulking in the streetlight, moving straight toward Darius. The night air was thick with tension. The rumble of the SUV's engine faded as Trent leaned back in the driver's seat, his cold eyes glinting. The two men stepping out were massive, their shadows stretching across the pavement. One had a shaved head and arms covered in tattoos. The other wore a black leather jacket, his fists already clenched. Darius didn't move. He stood rooted, his military badge in his pocket, his heart steady. He'd faced men like this before, not in uniforms but in alleys, in war zones, in places where intimidation was currency. Trent's voice carried lazily from the SUV. "You embarrassed me in front of the whole town, soldier. Videos, news, hashtags. You think that makes you a hero? No. It makes you a target." The henchmen moved closer, cracking knuckles, sneers plastered on their faces. "You don't scare me," Darius said firmly. His voice was calm, but his body was coiled like a spring. The tattooed man chuckled darkly. "We're not here to scare you. We're here to send a message." Before Darius could react, the leather-jacketed man swung. A heavy fist cut through the air toward his ribs. Darius pivoted sharply, his reflexes honed by years of training. The punch missed and his elbow snapped up, catching the man across the jaw. He stumbled back, stunned. The crowd that had been gathering on the sidewalks gasped. Phones flew into the air. People were recording again. The tattooed man lunged, trying to tackle Darius to the ground. But Darius planted his feet, using the man's momentum against him. With a grunt, he twisted, sending the thug sprawling onto the pavement. The crowd erupted in cheers and shouts. Trent's face in the SUV twisted with rage. By now, more people had spilled onto the street. Neighbors, shop owners, young kids holding phones high. Some shouted Darius's name. Others cursed at Trent. "This is our town too," someone yelled. "Leave him alone," another shouted. The henchmen scrambled to their feet, humiliated but still dangerous. But something had shifted. The crowd wasn't afraid anymore. Trent slammed his hand on the steering wheel. "Get back in the car," he barked. The men hesitated, glaring at Darius, but the weight of dozens of cameras forced them to retreat. The SUV roared away, tires screeching against the asphalt. The street erupted in applause. People crowded around Darius, some clapping him on the back, others holding up their phones like trophies. "You showed him. We've got your back. Brooksville needed this." Darius raised his hand, quieting them. "This isn't about me. This is about us. And it's far from over." The word spread like wildfire. Later that night, Alyssa met Darius at the church basement again. She was flushed with both fear and excitement. "You don't realize what just happened," she said. "That street fight, it wasn't just defense. It was a spark. People are talking about organizing, protesting, marching. You've lit something bigger than either of us." Darius rubbed his temples. "I didn't want a movement. I just wanted to live in peace." Alyssa leaned forward, her voice fierce. "Peace doesn't come when bullies run a town. Peace comes when people stand up." Darius met her eyes. Slowly he nodded. "Then we stand," he said. Meanwhile, inside the sprawling Mallory estate, Trent raged. He threw a crystal glass against the fireplace, shards scattering across the marble floor. His father, Richard Mallory, a towering man with a silver mane of hair, watched calmly from his armchair. "You're making a fool of yourself, boy," Richard drawled. "Losing control of one black veteran? Pathetic." Trent's fists clenched. "He's humiliating me. On camera. in front of the whole town. Then crush him, Richard said coldly. Not with fists, with power. You have the police, the mayor, the banks. Use them. Make him regret ever standing in that parking lot. Trent's jaw tightened. Consider it done. The next week, Darius's life spiraled. His landlord received notice to evict him for violations. His boss Alvarez was fined by the city for safety violations that didn't exist. His bank account froze under suspicious activity. Everywhere he turned, doors closed. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was systemic destruction. At the same time, Alyssa faced threats of her own. Anonymous letters appeared at her office. One morning she found her car tires slashed. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. She called for a town hall meeting, a chance for the people to confront the Mallory machine head-on. The community center overflowed with residents. Some stood shoulder to shoulder, others spilled into the hallway. Cameras from local and national outlets pointed at the stage where Alyssa and Darius sat. Mayor Whitaker tried to keep order, his face drenched in sweat. Let's maintain civility, he urged. But civility shattered the moment Trent Mallory strutted onto the stage, his suit crisp, his smirk polished. Brooksville doesn't have a problem, Trent announced smoothly. It has agitators. Outsiders stirring chaos. People like this so-called veteran who think they're above the law. Boos erupted. Cheers countered. The room shook with division. Darius stood, his voice cutting through the noise. I'm not above the law. I'm beneath its weight every day. But I won't be crushed. And neither will anyone else who refuses to bow. The room erupted in applause, louder than before. Even the cameras quivered with the force of it. Trent's face darkened. His composure cracked. That night after the town hall, Darius walked home alone. The energy of the crowd still burned in his chest. But unease gnawed at him. The black SUV wasn't on the street. The windows of his building were dark. Too dark. He pushed open his apartment door cautiously. And froze. The entire living room was trashed. Furniture overturned. Drawers dumped. Spray painted across the wall in giant red letters were 3 words. Final warning, King. And on his coffee table sat his military badge, bent in half, smeared with dirt. Darius stood in the wreckage, fists trembling. The one symbol of his service, his sacrifice, desecrated before his eyes. From the hallway outside, footsteps echoed. Slow. Heavy. Purposeful. The door creaked wider. And a shadow filled the frame. Not Trent. Not Brant. But a man Darius had never seen before, tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar slashing down his cheek and eyes that burned with cold menace. The stranger's voice was low and gravelly. Trent's playtime is over. Now, soldier, you deal with me. Darius stared at the shadowy figure in his doorway. The scar on the man's cheek caught the dim light, twisting his face into something both human and monstrous. You're not from here, Darius said evenly. The man stepped inside, his presence filling the room. His boots crunched on the broken glass. They call me Rourke, the man said, his voice like gravel. I clean up messes. And you, soldier boy, are one big mess. Darius's muscles tightened, but he didn't flinch. So Trent couldn't handle me himself. Figures. Rourke smirked, showing a row of uneven teeth. Trent's a spoiled brat. But his father? He doesn't like to be embarrassed. And you, King, you've embarrassed the Mallory name one too many times. He picked up the bent military badge from the table and flicked it casually. This was cute. But symbols don't mean anything here. Power does. And I've got it. Rourke didn't strike immediately. Instead, he circled Darius slowly, like a predator toying with prey. You fought for a country that doesn't fight for you, Rourke taunted. And now you're trying to fight for a town that's already bought and sold. You're wasting your breath. Darius locked eyes with him. You're right about one thing. I fought for people who never knew my name. But I'd rather fight for them than serve men like the Mallorys. Rourke's grin faded. His fist shot forward, lightning quick. Darius blocked, the impact rattling his arm. Another strike came, and another. The apartment became a battlefield of fists and grunts. But this wasn't war. There were no guns, no bombs. Just 2 men testing each other's resolve. At last, Rourke slammed Darius against the wall, pinning him with brute strength. His scarred face hovered inches away. You're stubborn, Rourke growled. I'll give you that. But stubborn men break. Darius's voice was low but unyielding. Then you'll have to break me in front of the whole town. Before Rourke could reply, the sound of voices drifted up from outside. Dozens of them. Darius and Rourke froze. Through the window, A glow of light spread across the street. Candles. Lanterns. Cell phone flashlights. The community was outside. Word of the vandalism had spread, and neighbors had gathered, chanting Darius's name, holding signs, raising their voices against the Mallorys. Rourke snarled. They think candles will save them? Pathetic. But Darius saw something else. Strength. Unity. Courage. For the first time he smiled. The next morning the church basement overflowed again. But this time it wasn't just locals. Reporters, activists, even state officials packed into the small space. Alyssa stood at the front with Darius by her side, her voice firm and unwavering. Brooksville has lived under the thumb of one family for too long. But last night we proved something. They can't silence us all. Not anymore. The crowd erupted in applause. Darius stepped forward, holding up his bent military badge. This isn't just about parking in a lot. This is about who gets to stand where they belong. I served my country, and when I came home I was told I didn't belong here. But I do. We all do. And we won't move for anyone who thinks otherwise. The room shook with cheers louder than ever. But the true blow came when Alyssa revealed files she had gathered, records of fraudulent loans, illegal land seizures, and police payoffs, all tied to the Mallory family. Projected on the wall, the evidence left no room for denial. Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed. The Mallory empire was crumbling in real time. That afternoon, Mayor Whitaker announced his resignation under pressure. Officer Brandt was suspended pending investigation. And Trent Mallory? He stormed into the community center, face pale and twisted with fury. You think you've won? He shouted. You think some files and chance change anything? My family built this town. But the crowd didn't cower. They stood taller. Stronger. Darius stepped forward, eyes locked on Trent. Your family built walls. We're tearing them down. Trent's smirk faltered. He looked around, at the cameras, at the faces united against him. For the first time he realized he had lost. He turned on his heel and stormed out, his once untouchable power gone. Days later, Rourke found Darius on the edge of town. He wasn't smirking this time. You made a fool out of powerful men, Rourke said quietly. That usually gets you killed. Darius didn't blink. Then why aren't I dead? Rourke studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he chuckled. Because maybe you're right. Maybe some fights are worth picking. He tossed the bent badge back at Darius and walked away, disappearing into the horizon. Months passed. Brooksville was changing. New leaders rose. Corrupt officials fell. The Mallory estate, once a symbol of untouchable power, was under investigation. Alyssa was elected to a higher office, her courage inspiring more than just the town. And Darius? He rebuilt his life brick by brick. No longer just a veteran trying to survive, but a man who had found a new mission, standing with his community, ensuring no one else was told they didn't belong. One evening as he walked past the very parking lot where it all began, he paused. The sun dipped low, painting the asphalt gold. A stranger parked nearby rolled down his window and muttered, "You can't park here." Darius smiled faintly, pulling the badge from his pocket, no longer bent but restored. "Watch me," he said. And for the first time in a long time he felt peace.